Well, safe, secure, affordable and efficient air transport is critical for Africa, for the transportation of goods and creating employment on the continent. But with airlines charging less for actual fares and more for taxes, the economy seems to be feeling the pinch. Chris Gota is from the International Air Transport Association, IATA. He joins us for more. Chris, thanks for joining us today. Let's perhaps start off with the big issue in Africa about open skies. One hears of stories from people in various countries who have to fly to Europe to catch another connecting flight to get back into a country that's perhaps only a couple of 100 kilometers away. It does seem like a crazy situation.
You're absolutely right. It's something that we've been calling on for some time for more liberalisation within Africa. It would be a tremendous boost to the economy of the region if we could improve the connectivity between African countries. You're absolutely right that at the moment it's often easier to go out into Europe and then back into Africa again. There was a declaration many years ago on behalf of many African nations where they agreed to look at this issue, but I'm afraid there hasn't been much progress.
So the reason for it?
Well, governments understandably want to look after their domestic aviation companies and so on, and their airlines, and that's an understandable objective, but they really need to think about the wider economic possibilities that are opened up if you improve the connectivity. So it's really about governments getting together and agreeing to liberalise the skies across Africa so that they can improve the connections.
Has that, or the benefits of an open skies policy, been appreciated? There's so many economic examples of why more trade or open areas are better, or is it something that is just being paid lip service to?
I think that generally the development of African economies in the last few years and the fact that, that over the next decade or so, many of the fastest growing nations in the world are going to be African economies, is starting to open the eyes of governments now to the advantages of connectivity. So I think in the past, as I said, this declaration was made, and yes, it's true to say that there hasn't been progress. I think we're confident that the message is getting through and that we'll see improvements in the years to come.
I suppose there's always going to be an issue about state-owned airlines. We have a situation in South Africa where South African Airways is once again being taken to the Competition Commission. Is it unique to South Africa that the state-owned airline gets attacked in this way from private competitors?
I can't really comment on the situation that you've referred to. That's obviously in the hands of the Competition Commission. IATA believes that wherever possible we should have a level playing field, and businesses should be allowed to compete fairly and without government interference. But it's really for individual states to decide how best to run their domestic aviation policies.
So IATA has a non-interference policy in domestic affairs. I've heard that somewhere before. Just take us through the whole story about taxes. As a user of airlines, we are seeing increasingly that a bigger percentage of the fee now goes to taxes. Is this a global phenomenon, and if so, why?
It is a global phenomenon. I mean, we look all over the world, there are increasing numbers of taxes and charges which are affecting the competitiveness of aviation, and we believe this is to the detriment to the economies in those countries. There are some particularly bad examples in Europe, for example, but also even in the United States, and certainly in Africa. And in Africa, really, there are a number of issues. There are taxes on fuel, which makes fuel particularly expensive in Africa compared with other parts of the world. But also we're seeing some increasing airport charges as well, which again is diminishing the competitiveness of the industry.
The airport charges are interesting. In South Africa, ahead of the 2010 World Cup, there was enormous amount of infrastructure investment in airports, but it appears as though some of the airports are operating profitably and some of the others are being subsidized.
Yes, as you say, there was a great deal of investment put in time for the World Cup, and clearly South Africa needs world-class facilities at its major hub airports. So I don't think we would have a problem with that. But I think it's also fair to say that perhaps some of the outlying airports have had a lot of investment which the traffic does not necessarily justify at this time. And there are some clear guidelines, some global guidelines in place that govern the best way to proceed on airport charges. And really, one of the key things is simply communication and consultation with the industry. Airlines are in a very good position to know what their plans are in terms of where they want to bring passengers, where they think the demand lies, and we're able to help balance the need for good facilities with costs that are competitive so that we can bring the traffic to those airports.
That was Chris Grota from the International Air Transport Association. Thanks for joining us from Switzerland.